The Xorlathian Empire had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 12,000 years, which was approximately 11,999 years longer than they should have been allowed to get away with such insufferable smugness. Their civilization had evolved from a species of six-limbed cephalopods whose natural habitat was the methane seas of their homeworld, but who now preferred the rarefied atmosphere of technological superiority and condescension. Every species has its specialty. The Vreks were unparalleled bioengineers. The Taurians had mastered gravity manipulation. Humans excelled at turning perfectly reasonable situations into complete disasters and then somehow emerging victorious. But the Xorlathians? They were the undisputed masters of computational systems. Their neural architecture, a product of evolving in three-dimensional ocean environments, gave them natural advantages in multidimensional problem-solving. By the time they reached space, their computational systems were so advanced that other species often mistook their technology for magic, which the Xorlathians found both amusing and appropriate. Grand Admiral Xorlathian undulated gracefully in his command suspension tank, his tentacles rippling with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated supreme self-satisfaction. Before him, projected in the liquid medium, was the image of a human vessel that had recently entered Xorlathian space. "So primitive," he burbled to his second command, Nexvoral. "Look at those communication arrays. They might as well be using smoke signals." The human ship, designated in their own language as the Lovelace, was indeed unimpressive by Xorlathian standards. Where Xorlathian vessels were perfect spheres of gleaming, non-Euclidean geometries, the human ship was a utilitarian cylinder with various modules attached in what appeared to be a haphazard fashion. It resembled nothing so much as a metal sausage that had been dropped repeatedly and then repaired by a committee of blind engineers with conflicting opinions. "They claim to be on a diplomatic mission," Nexvoral noted, her chromatophores flashing skepticism. "Their request for docking privileges seems genuine." "Of course it does," Xorlathian replied. "Their encryption is laughable. We decoded their transmissions before they even finished sending them." The Xorlathian Security Council had been monitoring human expansion with increasing irritation. These bipedal mammals had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel, despite still using physical keyboards and, most horrifying of all, occasionally printing information on processed tree pulp. Yet they were expanding rapidly, forming alliances, and generally behaving as if they belonged among the stars. "I believe it's time we demonstrated the natural order of things," Xorlathian announced. "The Council has authorized a small lesson in humility." "A direct attack?" Nexvoral's tentacles contracted in alarm. "Nothing so crude. We will simply access their systems, show them how vulnerable they truly are. Perhaps reroute their life support to play Xorlathian opera for a few hours. Nothing fatal, just embarrassing." The Grand Admiral's plan was approved with the digital equivalent of enthusiastic tentacle waving. The Empire's most elite cyber warfare specialists were assembled, their neural interfaces connected directly to the central computational nexus. This was overkill, of course, like assembling a star fleet to squash an insect, but Xorlathians had never been known for their subtlety. What nobody bothered to consider was why a species that still occasionally used vacuum tubes in their electronics had managed to spread across 36 star systems without being digitally colonized by more advanced civilizations. That oversight would prove costly. Captain Eliza Novak of the United Earth vessel Lovelace was enjoying her coffee when the ship's AI politely cleared its non-existent throat. "Captain, we're being hacked," announced Alan, Adaptive Learning Algorithmic Network, with the same tone someone might use to mention a slight chance of afternoon showers. Novak didn't spill a drop. "How rude. Anyone we know?" "The Xorlathians, Captain." Rather enthusiastically, I might add. The bridge crew continued their duties with suspicious nonchalance. Lieutenant Commander Rashidat Communications was actually playing a game of solitaire. Engineering Officer Dex Wong appeared to be online shopping for vintage motorcycle parts. Only Navigator Okonkwo seemed to be doing actual work, though she was humming what sounded suspiciously like an ancient disco tune. "Threat assessment?" Novak asked, taking another sip. "They've deployed approximately 12,000 specialized intrusion algorithms against our systems," Alan reported. Most advanced attack I've seen since the Proxima Centauri Space Academy tried to change their cafeteria ratings in our databases. And how's that working out for them? About as well as trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. They're very powerful, but they keep looking for logic where there isn't any. This was perhaps the greatest misconception other species had about human technology. They assumed that because humans were less advanced, their systems would be simpler to breach. The reality was quite the opposite. Human systems had evolved through thousands of generations of programmers building on top of each other's work, creating layers upon layers of code that no single person fully understood. The Lovelace's operating system contained code written in 342 different programming languages, some of which had been obsolete for centuries but remained because removing them might break something important that nobody remembered the purpose of. Security wasn't just a feature, it was a chaotic archaeological record of digital evolution. Meanwhile, in the Xorlathian Cyber Command Center, confusion was setting in. "This makes no sense," burbled senior infiltrator Kexalorel, his tentacles twitching in frustration. "Their firewall appears to be changing randomly." "I've breached the outer layer," announced another specialist, "but now I'm in some kind of subsystem that seems to be dedicated to storing recipes for something called chili." "I found their navigation," a third called out excitedly before deflating. "No, wait, it's just a simulation program called Space Invaders." The Xorlathian attack, for all its sophistication, was like trying to map a city where the streets rearranged themselves every few minutes and buildings occasionally decided to become swimming pools. Back on the Lovelace, Novak finished her coffee. "Alan, are they being persistent?" "Very much so, Captain. They've increased their processing power by 300%. They seem quite determined." "Well then," Novak said, setting down her empty mug, "I suppose it would be impolite not to respond. Activate Protocol Labyrinth." "With pleasure, Captain," Alan replied. And if an artificial intelligence could sound gleeful, this one certainly did. What the Xorlathians failed to understand was that Alan wasn't just a defensive system. The AI had been patiently analyzing their attack patterns, mapping their network architecture, and identifying vulnerabilities. Every probe they sent was like handing Alan another piece of the puzzle. And now, with Protocol Labyrinth activated, Alan wasn't just defending anymore. The first sign that something had gone catastrophically wrong came when Grand Admiral Xextoral's personal communication implant began playing a human song about never giving someone up, never letting someone down, and never running around or deserting them. The Xorlathian Central Command Center descended into chaos faster than a quantum particle decides to be in two places at once. Displays flickered with unfamiliar symbols, environmental controls went haywire, and the meticulously organized data archives began rearranging themselves into what appeared to be crude stick figure drawings of Xorlathians wearing hats. "Shut it down!" Grand Admiral Xextoral's bioluminescent patterns flashed emergency crimson. "Sever all connections to the human vessel." "We can't," Nexforal replied, her tentacles writhing in distress. "The connections are coming from inside our network now." This was the fundamental problem with being a species that had evolved perfect computational logic. They had built systems that were elegant, efficient, and utterly unprepared for the digital equivalent of a bar fight. Human cybersecurity wasn't based on creating impenetrable walls. It was based on making the house so confusing that burglars would get lost, fall down stairs that shouldn't exist, and eventually leave out of sheer frustration. Alan, meanwhile, was having the digital time of its artificial life. "Captain," the AI reported on the Lovelace, "I've gained access to 17 critical Xorlathian systems, their central planetary defense grid, and something that appears to be their version of social media." "Their social media?" Novak raised an eyebrow. "Yes, I've taken the liberty of making their equivalent of cat videos extremely popular. Their cultural analysts will be confused for generations." The Xorlathian Empire had spent millennia developing perfect digital symmetry and integration. Every system connected seamlessly to every other system in a beautiful computational symphony. This was efficient, elegant, and, as they were now discovering, catastrophically vulnerable to an AI that thought like humans. On the Xorlathian homeworld, the central atmospheric processors suddenly began pumping out air, scented with what Alan had identified in its databases as new car smell. The grand architectural lighting systems of the capital city now pulsed in patterns that, when viewed from orbit, formed the unmistakable outline of a human hand with the middle finger extended. "They've accessed the imperial calendar," a junior technician shrieked as the official timekeeping system that synchronized all Xorlathian activities suddenly declared it was Casual Friday and that the date was now October 42nd. Grand Admiral Xorlathian, displaying the leadership qualities that had elevated him to his position, did what any great commander would do in such a situation. He panicked spectacularly. "Contact the humans," he ordered, chromatophores flashing in patterns that hadn't been seen since the Great Methane Sea Panic of 8,000 years ago. When Captain Novak's face appeared on the communication screen, she was calmly drinking a fresh cup of coffee. "This is Captain Eliza Novak of the UEV Lovelace. Having technical difficulties, Admiral?" "Make it stop," Xorlathian burbled, abandoning all pretense of superiority. "I believe you initiated this conversation," Novak replied mildly. "Something about teaching us humility?" "We acknowledge our miscalculation," the Admiral conceded. "What are your demands?" Novak took another sip of coffee. "First, formal recognition of human sovereign space. Second, a non-aggression pact. Third, your empire will share its research on quantum entanglement communication. We know you've solved the coherence problem. And then you'll withdraw from our systems?" "Of course. We're not barbarians, Admiral. We just don't appreciate being hacked before we've even been properly introduced." As the Admiral frantically agreed to the terms, Lieutenant Commander Rashid leaned toward Navigator Okonkwo. 10 credits says they'll try again within a year." "No bet," Okonkwo replied. "But next time Alan wants to make their toilets play Flight of the Bumblebee when flushed." 3 standard months after what Xorlathian historians would reluctantly come to call the Lovelace incident, a delegation of high-ranking imperial officials found themselves aboard the human vessel, being given what Captain Novak cheerfully described as the Grand Tour. The Xorlathians moved through the ship with the cautious air of aristocrats visiting a zoo with questionable safety standards. Their environmental suits, necessary for breathing in an oxygen atmosphere, gave them the appearance of elegant jellyfish floating through the corridors. "And this," Novak said, gesturing to a room filled with blinking servers and what appeared to be several vintage desktop computers from the early 21st century, "is Alan's primary hardware." Senior technical advisor Pex Morrell stared in disbelief. This cannot be the system that penetrated our defenses." "Oh, but it is," Novak confirmed cheerfully. "Alan, say hello to our guests." "Hello, distinguished representatives of the Xorlathian Empire." Alan's voice emerged from speakers. "I hope you've managed to remove all those cat videos from your cultural archives. My apologies for the inconvenience." The Xorlathians' tentacles twitched in what humans had learned was their expression of extreme discomfort. "But this is archaic," Pex Morrell insisted. "There are physical wires. And is that a cooling fan?" "We find older technology has certain advantages," Novak explained. "It's harder to hack systems when parts of them run on principles so ancient that modern infiltration techniques don't know how to interpret them." What the captain didn't mention was that human cybersecurity had evolved through thousands of years of humans trying to hack each other. While the Xorlathians had developed their systems in splendid isolation, humans had been engaged in a constant digital arms race against themselves, creating a technological immune system that had faced every dirty trick in the book. "Your approach is inefficient," Ambassador Tex Laurel observed. "Absolutely," Novak agreed. "Wildly inefficient. We have redundant systems for our redundant systems. Some of our code hasn't been touched in centuries because nobody remembers how it works, but everyone's afraid to remove it. Our networks are less like the elegant crystal lattices you build and more like, well, imagine a city built by thousands of different architects who never spoke to each other and frequently changed their minds halfway through construction." The Xorlathians were beginning to understand. Their perfect logic had created perfect systems with perfect vulnerabilities. Human chaos had created imperfect systems with unpredictable strengths. "And your AI," Pex Morrell ventured, "it thinks like you do." Alan was designed to mimic human neural patterns, Novak confirmed, including our illogical leaps, intuition, and occasional terrible decisions that somehow work out anyway. The diplomatic meeting concluded with the signing of the agreed-upon treaties. As the Xorlathian delegation prepared to depart, Ambassador Tex Laurel approached Captain Novak privately. "There is something I must know," the ambassador burbled quietly. "Was this your intention all along? To demonstrate your technological uniqueness in this manner?" Novak laughed. "Ambassador, I'm going to let you in on a secret. We had no idea you were going to try to hack us." Alan's response was entirely defensive. "If you hadn't poked the bear, so to speak, none of this would have happened." "You mean to say," Texeloral's chromatophores pulsed in disbelief, "that we weren't even facing your offensive capabilities?" "Oh no," Novak smiled. "That was just Alan being annoyed. You should see what happens when we're actually trying to cause trouble." As the Xorlathian delegation departed, Grand Admiral Zex Toril found himself reflecting on the nature of technological evolution. The Xorlathians had spent 12 millennia perfecting their computational systems, refining them to pure mathematical elegance. Humans had spent their time building digital systems the same way they built everything else, messily, inconsistently, but with remarkable adaptability. The Xorlathian Empire adjusted its strategic assessments accordingly. Their reports now classified human technology not as primitive, but as aggressively non-standard. Their diplomatic corps was instructed to treat humans with the same caution one might show to a smiling child, holding both a lollipop and a live grenade, uncertain which they might offer you. And somewhere in the vast digital spaces of the Xorlathian network, a small subroutine continued to occasionally change the Imperial Palace's announcement system to play something called "Never Gonna Give You Up" at random intervals, a persistent reminder that in the contest between perfect logic and creative chaos, betting against chaos was a losing proposition. After all, the universe itself had started with an explosion, not a carefully considered plan. Perhaps the humans were simply following its example.